Hello friends, I wanted to jump on and share a prophetic word that was spoken over the nation of Australia in 1606, but also one that was spoken 300 years later, that was basically the same thing. So everybody knows about the Great South Land of the Holy Spirit word, the word that was from Quiros. So the thing about Quiros, the story goes for Quiros is that he wanted to evangelize the untouched regions at the ends of the earth, which is Australia included, which is New Zealand, which is the Pacific Islands, all that area. So he asked the Catholic Church if he could sail a ship to explore, find and claim the land for Spain and the Catholic Church. So he wanted to claim it for God and Spain. So he planned to name it La Australia del Espíritu Santo, which means the Southland of the Holy Spirit. So we have to give context to what is actually going on here. So in the 1600s, there were lots of land grabs. There was lots of explorers going out and claiming lands for king and country or for the church and country. And so you have to remember that these guys were being sent out in the name of God to claim lands, to bring the gospel to them, to civilize them, all these sorts of different things. And so his motivation was to claim the unknown southern lands, which is what they were all being called, Australia, New Zealand. They didn't have any idea what it was, what it looked like, because they were all in explorer mode. They didn't have the internet like we have now. They were all in this place of exploration where they were like, we know there's something out there. And so they called it like the unknown southern lands. So that's what they believed, that there was unknown southern lands, and that's what it just was, its name. And so his desire was to name it the Southland of the Holy Spirit. And so Quiros lost his bearings on his voyage and landed on the island of Vanuatu instead, and not the eastern coast of Australia. So he then erected a holy cross on the highest point of the land there and declared the above words, which was that be witnesses, the heavens and the earth and the sea and all its inhabitants, and those who are present, that I, the Captain Pedro Fernandez de Quiros, takes possession of all the lands that I have newly discovered, and all this region of the south, as far as the pole, which from this time shall be called Australia del Espíritu Santo. So the thing was that he erected this holy cross on the high point of the land and declared those words. So in that time, the church was all about claiming lands for God and evangelizing them to the Lord. So that was his motivation. So Quiros technically erected an altar to the Lord on that spot, claiming the whole area, the Great Southland of the Holy Spirit, basically. And so the cool thing about this is that, well, the funny thing about this, and then the other cool thing about this, so Quiros went home believing that he'd claimed Australia. He believed that he was on the eastern coast of the largest country, or the largest land piece, which was technically Australia. But he did not realise that it was another small country nearby, which was Vanuatu. And there's always a bit of contention around, well, are we the Great Southland of the Holy Spirit? Are we part of it? Because it didn't actually get staked on the nation of Australia. And I've heard other claims that it was staked on the nation of Australia, and I've heard other claims that it wasn't. And so there's always this contention around it. But the thing is if you listen to the declaration that he declares, it's all the region of the south as far as the pole, which from this time shall be called. So he's calling the whole area, not just Australia. And because he's not actually standing on the nation of Australia, it doesn't really matter. He's erecting this altar over the whole of the south area, declaring that it would be forever known as the Southland of the Holy Spirit. So for 7 years after his first trip, he tried in vain to petition the king to be allowed to take another expedition there, because he'd worked out that it actually was Vanuatu that he'd claimed, and he hadn't actually even set foot on the nation of Australia, the landmass of Australia. And so for 7 years after his first trip, he tried in vain to petition the king to be allowed to take another expedition there. When he finally got the permission, he died on the return journey there, which is pretty sad. But there was another explorer that found the land of Australia shortly after de Quiros' first false landing, which was an explorer named Wilhelm Jansoon. And he was also a godly man, and he was looking for Papua New Guinea. And so this process that Australia was technically, or that area was technically hidden. So it's unknown southern land. So you would think that it would be easy to find all these places, but the Lord had it hidden for a particular time, particular season, to be found by certain explorers. And if it had looked differently, instead of, say, the English establishing a colony here, or establishing their rule and reign here, it could have been a Spanish one. So it could look completely different. We could be a very different looking nation. But here's the cool part. So that happened in 1606. The first fleet didn't arrive until 1788. But then after it's been established, then the next cool part is that Smith Wigglesworth. Now, if you don't know Smith Wigglesworth, then you must be living under a rock in the Christian scheme of things. Smith Wigglesworth is one of the past fathers of the faith. Basically, you could call him. He's a pretty big deal. Like, he's got some stuff going on, and the thing is that Smith Wigglesworth came to visit the nation of Australia in the early 1900s. So think 1606, early 1600s, then the early 1900s. 300 years after de Quiros had declared it. So I don't know if Wigglesworth would have done any research before he came to the nation of Australia. I'm pretty sure there was no internet, there was no Google to see what other prophetic words had been spoken over the nation, what it was like, all these sorts of things. They usually just went on the Lord's leading, and they were like, okay, I need to go to the nation of Australia. So 300 years after he has declared that over the nation of Australia, this is what Wigglesworth says. Wigglesworth had an encounter after he returned from Australia and the islands around it. He saw the moves of God that would take place before the Lord comes. He said there would be a great move of the Spirit in which classic, denominational, remember, you're talking about early 1900s, so take it in context. Classical denominational people would receive the baptism with the Holy Spirit. The last great outpouring of the Holy Spirit before Jesus comes back would be in Australia, New Zealand, and the islands of the Pacific. So he's basically prophesied almost identical to what de Quiros had 3 centuries earlier than that. So I think that it's always really cool that we're thinking that there's all these random off-the-cuff words spoken over nations, or especially over the nation of Australia. And we think, oh yeah, we know about the Great Southland of the Holy Spirit. It becomes very rhetorical to us. It just becomes a thing. But the Lord, 300 years later, declares again. And somebody else could have found that nation first and claimed it for themselves, or claimed it a totally different way. But he is the first one to be recorded to declare over the Great Southland of the Holy Spirit. And 300 years later, it's like a reaffirming of the calling and the purpose, and a wider view of what that looks like. So I just read all that out of my latest book, Kingdom Dominion. There's heaps in it about the nation of Australia, the process of becoming the nation of Australia. There is lots of talk about spiritual warfare to do with what's happening in the nation of Australia. There is talk of principalities and things that need to be dealt with, unity, Indigenous stuff. So it was kind of like a case study. The Lord, because I'm a prophet to Australia, he was training me and teaching me through what he was walking me through. And so you can grab that on Amazon, and I was reading the rest out of that one. So hopefully this is like making you realize that Australia has a very specific destiny. It's been hidden. It was hidden for a certain period of time. And also, like, even New Zealand and the Southern Islands, they've been hidden for such a long time. And then at the certain time, it was revealed. So it's actually got a real specific purpose, calling, and destiny.